Hello, I'm Meg Graham, and I want you to know that I absolutely hate making these videos, so I certainly hope you enjoy watching them. I just wanted to share that with you because I just feel like we're beginning to have some sort of bond between us. Today we're going to talk about basic hormone biology. And hormones are secreted by glands known as endocrine glands. These glands sometimes can secrete multiple hormones. For example, if you look at like the pituitary gland, it can secrete 9 different hormones. So most of the endocrine glands do secrete more than one hormone. The hormones are usually secreted in small amounts, and it's like just a little bit will go a long way. That's one way we can control their activity. We don't want too much of it hanging around. And the hormones are usually going to be inactivated rather quickly because, again, we don't want them hanging around because hormones' job is to cause a response. They're chemical messengers that actually go out and attach to some tissue, and then they're going to cause some sort of response. So we don't want that just hanging around, just causing the response over and over and over. Well, as I said, they're released by endocrine glands, and they go into the extracellular fluid, and then the bloodstream picks them up, and it's going to take that hormone to all parts of the body. Well, the hormone doesn't act on every part of the body. It only reacts on, or causes a reaction on what we call target cells. And these target cells are cells that have a receptor for the particular hormone that's being secreted. Most of your hormones are going to have multiple target cells in different tissues. For example, if you look at something like insulin, insulin is going to go to just about all the cells in the body, and it's going to cause a response. The response that insulin causes is for the cell to uptake glucose. So one hormone can act on many, many different cells. But some hormones only have a single target cell. If you look at something like thyroid stimulating hormone, that only goes to the thyroid gland and only acts on those cells to cause a response. So it just depends, but in general, most hormones are going to have multiple target cells. And it turns out that most tissues are going to have multiple receptor types. So I may have a receptor, like if I'm talking about the uterus, for example, I may have a receptor for oxytocin. That's a hormone. And that oxytocin is going to cause smooth muscle contractions. So when it's time to deliver that baby, you're going to get this stimulus of oxytocin, and it's going to start causing the smooth muscle of the uterus to contract, and that's going to expel the baby. Well, the whole 9 months before that, though, I had receptors on that same smooth muscle tissue that were receptors for progesterone, another hormone. And progesterone is going to cause smooth muscle relaxation. And that allows the baby to grow and develop, that fetus to grow and develop while it's in the womb. So you've got 2 different receptors here and 2 totally different responses. So most tissues are going to have multiple receptor types, and then you can, again, you have more fine control because you can send out a hormone that's going to cause this reaction, or you can send out a hormone that's going to cause the complete opposite reaction. If you look at the activity of hormones, there's several things they can do. They can actually alter the permeability of the plasma membrane. So you may have like an ion-gated channel. Well, a hormone may cause that channel to open or to close that gate so that ions can or cannot get in. You can have hormones that stimulate the synthesis of new proteins. If you look at something like an enzyme, those are proteins. Enzymes are especially controlled by hormones. You can take an enzyme and that will speed up a chemical reaction. So if you want to really control things, you control the hormone that causes that enzyme to be made, and then the enzyme itself is going to cause a change in the time of how quickly that reaction occurs. Some of your hormones are going to change the activity of existing proteins. So you might have an existing protein that sits around in your blood or in an inactive state. So it's floating around, but it's not really doing anything. Well, then you can get a hormone released, and that will suddenly change that enzyme and make it an active hormone. And then you're going to get a great response. Some of your hormones will actually stimulate mitosis. You take growth hormone, for example. It's going to go, and one of the things it's going to do is it's going to indirectly cause chondrocytes to start dividing. Well, that's how long bones lengthen in adolescents and kids. So they're actually stimulating the chondrocytes to divide. And then you've got other hormones that are going to cause secretory activity. So you may have something like estrogen. Estrogen is going to go to the uterine lining, and it's going to cause the uterine lining to grow and proliferate and secrete all kinds of rich juices that are going to provide a natural environment and a great environment for a fetus to grow and develop. So hormones have all kinds of different activities. Again, you've got to control them, though, because you don't want this activity just taking place at any time. So hormones have to be inactivated quickly. Usually your liver can inactivate hormones, and this can occur sometimes within seconds, minutes. It doesn't take long. So just as soon as they're put out in the blood, they're just as quickly inactivated. Your kidneys can actually remove the hormones, take them out of circulation, and then you excrete them in your urine. It turns out that some of your target cells, so the place where that hormone is actually acting, they will have enzymes that can actually inactivate the hormones. Most of your hormones, though, are going to have what we call a short half-life. So let's look at a half-life and see what that is. It's just like the name says, half-life means it's the amount of time it takes to remove or eliminate 50% or half of a substance from the body. And it turns out that these short half-life hormones, so if you have something that just stays around real quick and then it's inactivated and sent away, that would be a short half-life hormone. Well, these short half-life hormones usually are going to alter the activity of an existing protein. So that might be one that would take a protein that's floating around in an inactive state and cut something off, so make some chemical change to it so that it becomes active. The long half-life hormones, though, tend to cause the production of new proteins to be made. So they're actually going to go to the level of the gene and turn on something in that DNA and cause the production of a new hormone. So it's going to take a lot longer for them to do their job, and so they're going to have to hang around longer, so that's why we say they have a long half-life. Steroid hormones usually work like this, but you'll learn more about that later on. All right, what do we have next? Most of your hormones are going to work by negative feedback, and you should all know what negative feedback is. That's where you have a stimulus that actually causes the production of, in this case, say, a hormone, and then that hormone goes to your target cells and causes some sort of action, and the effect of that hormone is going to be the opposite of what initially caused that stimulus. And so then that comes back around and it turns off the stimulus, and I probably just confused you thoroughly with that. So let's just look at this little hypothetical situation right here with the hypothalamus. So if your body, let's say, needs energy, okay, you're going to go to the hypothalamus is kind of the chemist of the body. So let's just write up here, that's our chemist. And it's going to say, man, we need more energy in the blood. So that's going to cause the hypothalamus to release a hormone called thyrotropin-releasing hormone, which is going to go to your anterior pituitary gland. So now it comes here, and it's going to stimulate the anterior pituitary gland to release thyroid-stimulating hormone. Well, you can tell from the name where thyroid-stimulating hormone is going to act. It's going to stimulate the thyroid. So it goes to the thyroid gland, and it causes the production of your thyroid hormones like T3 and T4. And then these T3 and T4 hormones will go to your target cells, and they're going to cause the production of energy. So that's going to give us what we started out with, a need for energy. And now we've gone through this long line of things, and we've ended up making energy. Well, it turns out that these thyroid hormones themselves will then come back and tell the anterior pituitary, you know what, stop producing TSH. We're already making energy. And they'll go up to the hypothalamus and they'll say, stop producing TRH because we don't need any more energy. So in negative feedback, it's the original stimulus is going to cause the opposite effect, and then that opposite effect turns off the original stimulus. I hope I didn't just screw you up with all that, but you should have already known that from 201 anyway. You can also have positive feedback, but again, most of your hormones are going to work by negative feedback. Again, if you look at the uterus, it works on positive feedback when it comes time to deliver that baby. Oxytocin will be secreted, and that's a hormone that I said causes smooth muscle contractions. Well, it starts causing those contractions of the uterus, and then it turns out that the smooth muscle becomes more receptive to that oxytocin, and so it kind of gets into this cycle, and it's like the more oxytocin you get, the more contractions you get, the more contractions you get, the more oxytocin is released, and you want this positive feedback thing to keep going until the baby is delivered. So that's positive feedback, but again, most of your hormones are going to work by negative feedback, not by positive feedback. All right, where are we at now? Okay, you can also take your hormone activity and you can either upregulate or downregulate your receptors, okay? And what we're talking about, let's start with upregulation. That's going to cause an increased sensitivity to the hormone at the target cells. And you're like, well, how does the target cells just suddenly become more sensitive? Well, it turns out that you change the number of receptors. So your receptors become more sensitive to the hormone because you can actually increase the receptor numbers. So you can upregulate it or make your tissue more sensitive to the hormone when it is released. You can also have what we call downregulation. And downregulation is going to cause a decreased sensitivity to the hormone at the target cell. The receptors are going to become less sensitive. It turns out you will have less receptor numbers around, so therefore your tissue becomes less responsive. If you look at, for example, insulin. Insulin is a hormone that actually causes sugar to be taken into cells. And that decreases the blood sugar because you're taking the sugar from the blood and putting it into the cells. Well, if you're an obese person and you have a terrible diet and you're eating all this sugary crap all the time, you're constantly having to release insulin to try to get that blood sugar out of your get that blood sugar out of your blood, that blood glucose down, and get it into your cells. So you want to keep releasing insulin so that you can get that sugar into the cells where they can actually use it. Well, the more you stimulate your body like this as you go with time and you're more and more obese, your receptors are like, man, I am tired. You have been working me to death. Leave me alone. I quit. And so your receptors actually just start shutting down. Well, then your insulin levels are, you're releasing it, but it's not getting the glucose out of your blood. So your glucose levels will start going up. And then you turn into a diabetic. So we'll talk more about that later on. But you've got to have a control of how your receptors work, and you can overwork them and cause downregulation and cause a disease as simple as from eating too much and causing diabetes. All right. Well, what actually controls the release of hormones from endocrine glands? You've got three main ways that they're controlled. You've got humoral stimuli, which is actually where a humor, and a humor is nothing more than a body fluid, actually is what's causing the stimulus. So if you look at the definition I have here, it says humors are released in direct response to changes of ions or nutrients in the blood. Well, let's look at something like calcium. Let's say you have low calcium in your blood. Well, your body will sense this, and it will look at that humor and say, oh, we need more calcium in the blood. And that will go to the parathyroid hormone, and it'll say, let's release parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone then goes and acts on different tissues, and it causes more calcium to be released in the blood. So you have this kind of negative feedback loop that keeps it in control, but that basic humor of how much calcium is in the blood actually caused the response. So that's what we call humoral stimuli. Then you also have what's called neural stimuli, and I've got little slides here showing this. Neurals, that's the calcium. Neural stimuli is where you have direct nervous input, and that causes the release of hormones. And this is not a very common way for hormone activity to be controlled. But if you look at your sympathetic nervous system, that one that causes fight or flight, you actually have a direct neural contact between the brain and the adrenal gland. And the adrenal gland can be stimulated directly from this nervous control. So we call that neural control. And what happens is when that brain stimulates the adrenal gland through that sympathetic system, it's going to cause a release of your catecholamine hormones, which are epinephrine and norepinephrine. That's your fight or flight hormones. So if some goo-boo crazy man comes here to the door while I'm sitting here by myself late at night recording this video for your benefit, not mine, sorry about that, and he's got a gun, my fight or flight system is going to kick in. That sympathetic nervous system is going to kick in, and I'm going to get an immediate release of epinephrine and norepinephrine. And then that's going to cause my heart rate to increase, my blood pressure to increase, my bronchioles to dilate, everything I need to fight or flight, get out of here, take care of myself. So that's direct neural control, and that's causing a change in hormones. Then the last way you have hormonal control, or the release of hormones, is through hormonal stimuli itself. So with a hormonal stimuli, a hormone will actually cause the release of another hormone. We already saw that when we were talking about the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus can go and cause the release of TRH, which would go to the pituitary gland, and then the pituitary gland would release TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone, which would then go over to the thyroid gland and cause the release of T3 and T4, which would cause more energy production. So let's just put increased energy. Don't you love the way I write? But anyway, it's a hormone that's causing the release of another hormone. So those are your 3 ways that you can have hormonal control. I hope you got something out of this because I hated making it. Bye.